Jeanette Montalvo, my executive secretary, for their work in helping plan and coordinate today's event, along with Durham Tech's Facility Services Department and Public Safety Department. Durham Tech's mission is to enrich our students' lives and the broader community through teaching, learning, and service. Today's forum is a recognition that our community, like many communities in our state and nation, is growing more diverse. Our ability to be true to our mission, therefore, depends increasingly on how effectively we serve Latinos and Latinas, how we can ensure their full access to higher education, and their participation in our economy and our society. I thank you for being here today to help continue the dialogue toward that end. And now I'll ask Tara McKenzie Sounderock, Vice President of the Foundation and Community Relations of the Community Foundation of the Greater Greensboro and a member of Hispanics in Philanthropy for make some comments.
Buenos días. Oh, that was very good. Yo soy Tara Sandercock y estoy muy alegre a decir bienvenidos a todos a este lugar especial, en el día especial, este tiempo especial. I'm Tara Sandercock, and it's my pleasure to say welcome to all of you on this special day, in this special place, and at this special time. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Hispanics in Philanthropy, I welcome you to this national forum. We are delighted that the White House has moved to North Carolina today. We have been waiting for you, so again, bienvenidos. On the statewide level, as my predecessor here has indicated, in North Carolina, we have the Funders Collaborative for Strong Latino Communities. For the past decade, 25 funders from around the state have joined together to provide support for Latino-led nonprofits that are making a difference in the lives of so many people across the state. Many of those funders are here today, and I'd like to say thank you for taking part today. The theme of college access and degree attainment rings through the grants that we make and the technical assistance that we offer through our collaborative. And right here in the Triangle, HIP coordinates the Triangle Latino Student Success Project with support from the Triangle Community Foundation, Lumina Foundation, Z. Smith Reynolds, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Our results for these past 3 years are looking great, and we seek to expand this work. Thank you to all involved. Access to education is what we are about at the very local level as well. My day job, when I'm not working on behalf of Hispanics in Philanthropy, is with the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro, and that's just about an hour to the west of here. We are founding members of the HIP Funders Collaborative. Just last week, I was meeting with one of our foundation's Latino giving circles. We have two, so I'm very happy about that. That group of givers, who call themselves the Patronato Mezquital, which loosely translated means sponsor or sponsorship of Mezquital, which is a city from where many of them come in Durango, Mexico. They shared with me that their top priority for their work here in their community is to strengthen access to college for their stakeholders, for the 450 people in this area that come from that community in Mexico. They seek what all people seek, access to a bright future. And this bodes well in our Greensboro area for our community effort called Degrees Matter, a community-wide campaign to focus on college completion, which is now being launched. Yesterday, I was talking with my colleague, Cami Sorge, who's here in the audience today, about her experience in helping Latino students at her university, UNCG in Greensboro. She described the differences and the similarities of working with Latino students, she and her recruiting team. She described how important it is in involving the entire family in the recruitment phase. She talked about the persistence outreach efforts they have in her department. They're often conducted in similar fashion to that of working with other first-generation college goers and include working out financial aid and income replacement strategies. She described to me that her Latino students, and she said, now I don't want to stereotype, okay? And I said, I get you. But she says often she finds that Latino students are more engaged and dedicated than other subgroups of students? And again, she said, I don't want to stereotype and I don't want to disparage anyone else, but she sees a slightly different spirit there. These are assets to build upon as we concentrate on strategies to help our Latino students access and succeed in college. So, today's an exciting day. To the White House team, we say thank you for coming to North Carolina, and we'll be here when you get ready to come back, and we'll go with you across the country. And to all of you attendees, I say thank you for choosing to come today, because we all have many things, many fires back at home that we could be attending to. But I say thank you for being here. Be active, exchange cards, use the name tags, network throughout the day. And remember, at HIP, we have a saying that goes like this: you don't have to be Hispanic to be hip. So remember that. Okay? So welcome to this national forum. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a wonderful time.
My name is Alejandra Ceja. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here in North Carolina. We've had an exciting visit here, meeting with several students and leaders in the community that are making a difference and helping us really achieve that Latino student success. And I want to thank you for bringing a national spotlight on the importance of college access. For us, we will be discussing what is on our minds: the optimal ways to accelerate student achievement, engage young people to excel in school and life, and inspire youth to build the confidence in themselves to go beyond what they believe is possible. We are taking key steps at the federal level to address these problems and bring us closer to President Obama's vision for America to have the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world by the year 2020. The President wants the U.S. to have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world and to get back to the lead that we once held. To regain our lead, we have to take concrete steps to achieve that goal. Early intervention is crucial to achieving higher success rates in high school, gaining access to college, and increasing completion rates that result in graduation from high school and graduation from college. We must ensure that we're educating and preparing students for the new jobs of the 21st century. So the goal of today's forum is to continue to bring the national spotlight on this critical issue for the Latino community, how it impacts North Carolina, and to identify those strategies that are working. Today you will hear from key experts, and each session is moderated from some talented experts in this industry. And we want to be able to ensure that this is not a one-day conversation. So you will hear from our key experts. We will be focusing on the importance of the research and policy. What does it tell us? The importance of student support services. You'll hear later today from one of our colleagues who will talk to you about the First Lady's North Star agenda. She just launched her Reach Higher initiative, and you'll hear from him in terms of the strategies and the outreach that will be taking place in the next couple months. And you'll also hear about the investments. Who are those key leaders that are helping us complement what's happening at the federal level? But most importantly, you will hear about the student perspective. So we are going to kick it off today. Many times we tend to talk about these policy issues and the students aren't in the room. So it's very important for us to be able to highlight that student voice. Today you will hear from some extraordinary student leaders who are going to change the world. You're very lucky, North Carolina, to have them in your state. So we're going to kick it off. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to invite our student leaders to join me on the panel, and we'll go ahead and kick it off. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eva Lopez. I am a student ambassador at Johnson Community College right now. I came here when I was 2 years old. I'm originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, and I'm also a deferred action beneficiary. A little about myself. When I was here, high school, I pretty much did many activities. I was president of the AIM Club. I participated in SAF with the LAMPED, Student Action for Farm Workers. I also did, I was a National Honor Society, National Technology Society, and I did many events for the school. When I was a senior in high school, I applied for many universities and colleges. I was accepted to many of them, but since I was not a documented student, I had to pay out-of-state tuition to those major universities, and I couldn't afford that. So right now I'm going to Johnson Community College, which is college is a little bit cheaper than universities. And I'm a student ambassador, which a student ambassador pays pretty much, gives a full ride scholarship except bonus.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Alma Perez, and I am very glad to be here today. I am a middle college high school senior, and I will be graduating the 22nd of this month. Yeah, it's very exciting to know that I'll be graduating, yes. And I've been working on my associates in arts here with the concentration in pre-law. And I have also been working on my paralegal certificate. And there's two main reasons why I'm here today. One of them is to speak to you all about the Hispanic society, the Hispanic community and in the community colleges, and how we're affected by the lack of support we receive. And the other reason I am also here today is to speak to you all a little about myself. Well, I migrated to the United States with my mom and dad when I was about 2 years old. And the reason we migrated to the United States was because we seek prosperity. And not only that, but we also were aiming for the American dream, which is why many immigrants come to the United States. And ever since, I have not been back to my native land, which is it's not a nice feeling to know. I have grown here in America all my life, and this is what I know. This is what I call home. And it's heartbreaking to know that I don't have the same opportunities that others do. And I've always believed that choosing where to be born or when to be born is something that no unborn human being has power over. And according to the Declaration of Independence, all people are created equal, and this supports the American dream, which actually states if you come to America, work hard and play by the rules, you should have a good life. But unfortunately, this is not the case for me or other 65,000 undocumented students that are constantly graduating from high school annually, and about 10% of them actually about 10% of them actually attend college. And this is not due to lack of desire for an education or career readiness or college readiness. The major reason why a lot of people don't actually attend college, undocumented students don't actually attend college, is for the inability to pay the out-of-state tuition costs. And being aware of all this, being aware of my legal status, being aware of where I stand in society has made me act and has made me get involved with other clubs and organizations here at Durham Tech. I am involved with the Student Senate here and the Executive Board, and I actually attended a conference not too long ago. It was the M4CSGA conference, and for those of you who are not very familiar with it's a conference where all 58 community colleges actually gather across the state, gather up to have major discussions about issues that impact North Carolina as a state. And it was a great experience because I actually brought forth a motion regarding a workshop to be made in future conferences to inform others about undocumented students and how they're impacted by the lack of support we receive. And it was a success, thankfully. And I would like to see change, and that is why I'm here today.
Good morning. My name is Austin Santoyo. I was born in Hispanics, and I came to the United States in the year around 1999 and 2000 with my mom when I was 4 years old. When we came over here, it was a little difficult getting used to the changes that from Mexico and the United States. But since I was only 4 years old, I grew, I adapted easier than my parents did. And right now, I'm in middle college here in Durham Tech. I'm a senior, and also I'm a student ambassador for middle college, and there's other groups in it, other members in it. Middle college has given me a great opportunity here at Durham Tech, allowed me to gain a lot of credits, college credit, like free, and I plan to use those to transfer to state and seek a bachelor's or master's in civil engineering. Since my brother and my sister, they didn't complete high school for reasons, various reasons. Since I'm graduating also from college and May 22nd, that I'm gonna be the first one to graduate in my family, and that makes me proud, and I'm also making my family proud. My parents have always supported me, anything I do, and civil engineering is just great. And I know that many other students or Latino students don't exactly have the support of their parents like I do, but it's just great to know that I actually do and I can, and that they have helped me so much completing this and also going to college. And I know that with their support, with middle college support and my parents' support, and also I have to do my part to get to where I want to, which is civil engineering. That I know that this can be possible. So since, like I said before, my sister and my brother didn't complete high school. I feel like I'm kind of the future for my family, and pulling them out the struggle we have been in for several years now since I came over here. And I know that with their help, my parents' support, and this opportunity that Durham Tech and middle college have provided, that I'm getting. Thank you.
Well, you make us all very proud, and you are the future for our country. So you guys have powerful testimonials. Yesterday we were at Middlebrook High School talking to a group of students that participate in the Graduate program. And one of the things they said to us was that sometimes they don't have the motivation to even want to continue with their education. So I want to hear from you all. What has motivated you to pursue your goals, your educational goals, and what advice would you give to those students that are feeling a little bit discouraged?
What motivates me to keep on going? I guess it would be to make my family proud, to benefit myself, and not to be in the same situation as I was, being economically and as a education status. Actually, realizing my dream of being a doctor, I always wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid, so that's what keeps on motivating me. That I want to be a surgeon one day and work at UNC Chapel Hill. And for those students that are not motivated, at the beginning I wasn't motivated to go to college when I was denied, when I saw I couldn't afford them, but I kept on going, I kept on applying, and I got scholarships and stuff, so it is possible. It's something you're gonna struggle, but it is possible to succeed. And if you keep on going, you're gonna get there. It's gonna be way harder than what other people had to face, but eventually it is.
One of the reasons that actually motivate me is, like Herbert said, my family. I would be the first one to actually graduate from high school, middle school, and eventually college. I think that I would also, another thing that actually motivates me are my siblings. I have 4 other siblings, and I would be the example to lead. And if I were to give advice to other students, would be that when there is a will, there is a way. I don't think that out-of-state tuition is something that's going to keep me from attending college.
Something that motivates me is my parents, and especially my dad, since he hasn't seen his mom in over 14 years. And I actually want to take him to Mexico to see his mom. And we haven't gone because that works with economics. But that's something that actually motivates me, and that actually discourages me from doing that. Even though, like, I mean, I miss my family too, but I don't really remember them because I was bored. I don't remember anything, so that's why I want to go over there too, to at least like see if I can remember. And advice that I give people that are motivated to continue is that there are a lot of obstacles to face, but even everything, even though everything like can be stacked against you, like you have to keep going and keep going against and getting over those obstacles, because sooner or later something, like my counselor said from her college said, like you never know what opportunities that are going to be available, and you're not going to be able to see those opportunities if you don't fight for it and look for ways to actually get into college or get where you want to.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit about your experience as a high school student? What worked, what didn't work? What kind of support services did you have or did you access?
When I was in high school, what worked was pretty much teachers, counselors, activities you were in. They helped you, like, they supported you. They gave you advice of what to do. Even though the majority of the teachers, they didn't know that I was undocumented, they still gave me support. Like, they thought I was documented, but I never told them. They still gave me like options of what colleges there is, what I wanted to be, what major, and stuff like that. When I was in the A club, that motivated me a little more because I saw many students that were undocumented actually willing to go get an education, not just be in high school, graduate, and go to work. They actually wanted to move on to get a higher education and become what they actually dreamed of doing. What didn't work was pretty much putting yourself down. If you put yourself down in high school, pretty much it's over. You had to keep motivating yourself to focus on going to college instead of saying, oh, it's not possible because someone died. But if you keep on saying you can, then eventually you will get it.
I think that one thing that has actually helped me out in high school has been the Emily K Center, because I think that I have gained a lot of resources and support from the Emily K Center. Since I am the first generation to actually attend high school, it hasn't been possible to actually approach my parents and tell them, what do I do next? How does college work, or what are the steps for me to take to actually go to college? I think that gaining resources from other nonprofit organizations is a great, it's very beneficial, and it has been very beneficial for me.
Something that worked for me was taking classes that other people just don't want to take because they think it's too difficult, or they just don't want to do the work. And like Trevor said, like if you keep putting yourself down like that, you're not gonna get anywhere. You're gonna be in the majority of people that are like, not that they're not going to get anywhere in life, but they won't get their stores in the people that are actually like attempting and want to get into these classes that, like I said, like that's not gonna be take. Like for example, like in high school, I was in ninth grade. I was in classes with juniors and seniors, and even like seniors and juniors, they just didn't want to try. So that's when I saw also that that's what worked for me, and that's why I came here to college. Like I said, because here it's faster pace, and actually like college education, not just like basic high school. And something that else that didn't work was, well, something else that I saw that didn't work was, like I said, the lack of support from parents and also from the school system. It's just bad.
So I'll add my buenos dias to all of you. Great panel talking from students' voice and perspectives. We're gonna change the tide just a little bit, actually quite a bit, and give you an overview of research and policy related to college access. And I think all of us here on the panel could take the entire time sharing what we know, but that's not the purpose of this panel. The purpose is to share with you an overview, maybe hopefully be stimulating enough that you will have comments and questions that we can have a little bit more of a conversation. So our crew, as knowledgeable as they are going to try and keep it short and provocative, and if you don't have questions, we'll give them a little bit more time. I want to make sure you know the format of what that is. Also the bios are in the agendas and will be shared by the staff. So I'm not going to go through that in order to give our group here a little bit more time, but please do take a look at the agendas and our esteemed colleagues and their vast experience to give you a little context. So, college access, overview, research, and policy. We were, as I was debating in my own head what to cover to set the context for my colleagues, and I wanted to make sure that we were clear on the context where we were speaking. And I talked to Althea and some others, and we were talking about making sure we are looking at emerging communities. And that's been our term, but others are using it as well, to look at the young, fast-growing Latino population that's happening all over the country. Some of the fastest growth is here in the South and Southeast. And I wanted to set a little context. Our colleagues will go a little bit broader in thinking about that. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the data because data are wonderful for you data nerds out there. But I think data are only as good as they're used to compel action. And a large part of our comments are really grounded in that. For policy, data do matter, but they only matter if it makes you do something differently and more importantly in intentional manners. And that's from whence I think we come as a panel and sharing with you. So I took the liberty of pulling a little bit of data to set the context of our panel, looking at some of the states that are here. Let me get a show of hands quickly. People here from North Carolina. All right, in the house, good. Georgia, good, Georgia. Oh. Small but vocal, good. Kentucky, all right, also. Tennessee. I love that. Early in the morning, we're already going with a little bit of coffee. So I'm going to share some very quick stats to get us grounded. And I really hope that as you hear the comments from our colleagues, you think about the context in which you work, the base with which you have power to make a difference, and think about how that can translate up to scale. Because the research and policy work we do is often about scale. It takes the beautiful stories you heard in that first panel and find ways to aggregate it up. Because it's not about just serving one or two, although that's what fundamentally makes a difference. But in research and policy, it is about how we serve 100,000, 100,000, a million students. And sometimes we lose the individual student voice and experience to try to get to scale. And therein lies the rub, the challenge we face in making a difference to each individual student, but at a scale that really can make a fundamental difference at the state and the national level. So I'll give you a couple of quick stats. And since the group is predominantly from North Carolina, I'm going to ask a quick question here and see where we are. Anyone know what percentage of the population in North Carolina is Latino? 11%? Oh, wow. 10.6. Do you go to bed with the census thing there? Great. It's actually 9%, very close. I was at a session where we were talking to some students and I asked them in Georgia about this and they said, 84%? That's the sphere of influence in your life, that's great. It's not quite that high, but it's good to know that in Georgia it's 11%, but in North Carolina it's 9%. And the K-12 population in North Carolina, 34%? Anyone else? 20? Okay. Just want to see what fellow data nerds are out there. Good. 10%? Oh, good. Okay, thank you, sorry. Another number? Okay. 12%. So 9% of the overall population of North Carolina, 12% of the K-12 population. If I had included the 0 to 5 data, it would be even higher, it's over 15%. And the reason, it's very simple stats, but this speaks to the importance of college access, college preparation, and education policy right now in K-12, because that's our current and future workforce in North Carolina. And paying attention to simple descriptive stats like that are really important to ground the work that you do at the individual level and research and policy. North Carolina is 11th ranked state in terms of Latino population in the country, right? 50 states, North Carolina is 11th, Georgia is 10th. People don't think about that. We always think of California, Texas, and Florida, right? So understanding that you've got a young, fast-growing population that's in your educational pipeline right now, and what you do today matters, is what guides a lot of the research and policy work that we are trying to do on this stage and across the country, the White House Initiative and others. So I think it's important to pay attention to that. The last stats I will give you, with my minute and a half that's left, is looking at degree attainment. That's the other part of your context, right? Because when you look at the population and you look at degree attainment, you see the opportunity for first-generation students and what needs to happen in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Kentucky, and in Tennessee. In North Carolina, Latino adults, 16% have an associate degree or higher in North Carolina, compared to 35% of all adults in North Carolina. It means that's half as much as all adults in North Carolina. That doesn't mean that we can't improve educational attainment for all because 35% is only a third of your adults. But if half as many of those Latino adults have a degree, that means that 12% of your students that are in K-12 would be the first in their family to go to college. Paying attention to that and research and policy is really, really critical. Georgia, degree attainment for adults, Latino adults, 18% have an associate degree or higher, 34%. Again, so around the 30s, and this is actually consistent with national numbers. Keeping that in your head to tell your individual story, your program policy story is really important. Kentucky, 17% of Latino adults versus 28% of all adults. Tennessee, 16% of Latino adults, 24% of all. I mean, nationally, 20% of Latino adults in the entire country have an associate degree or higher, compared to 36% of all. So we have a better job to do at all levels, as Alex has mentioned, Alejandro was mentioning, for the administration's goal, but Latinos twice as much. Accelerating success really matters, and our research reinforces that. So for this panel, I have a lot more data, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot to think about that. For our panel today, we want to talk about college access. And we know college access is the necessary precursor to college success and college completion, right? You can't complete if you don't go. But college access is not the only goal. Or too many of us in public policy, we thought we'd create access and, que vayan con Dios, we go with God, we got them in, we got them to get through. And the reality is that we also have a job to do to make sure they're academically prepared to be able to persist and be retained to completion, right? And that's a challenge. Persistence is what students do, retention is what institutions do. And we've got to make sure that we go from access to completion. But our panel here is focused on access, barriers, opportunities. I have some questions in case you don't, but I hope that setting this context and when you hear from our wonderful colleagues, you'll have questions to engage in dialogue. It's certainly not enough time, but you have resources now that you might not have had before in reaching out to us and to the White House Initiative to continue the conversation. So with that, we kind of chose, given the way we were seated, to start. And I've asked my colleagues here to, as close as possible, stick to about 5 minutes of provocative remarks and hoping that we can have a conversation with you. And maybe we'll start with Philip on the end and work with Jennifer and then Will to engage in the conversation. So please help me welcome Philip.
Hello. There we go. I'm Philip Lovell. I'm with the Alliance for Excellent Education. We're a Washington, D.C. based organization focused primarily on secondary school policy, and our mission is basically to help produce more of the types of young people that we saw this morning. I really want to applaud Alex Eka and White House Initiative on Hispanic education, because I think this event really represents what their work is all about. It's about the young people. And it's so often that we have these policy conversations, especially while we're cooped up in the sort of weird world that is Washington, where there's not a student voice at all, and all we're talking about is students. And so that you guys started this event with the people who matter most, while slightly a challenge for those who come after to meet that expectation. It's just a great way to start the day. Reminded of a quote by Cesar Chavez, who said that students must have initiative. They should not be mere imitators. They must learn to think and act for themselves and be free. And that's exactly what the young people who we just heard from were striving to do. Over the last 40 years, our country has changed significantly. There was a time when a post-secondary education was an option, but it wasn't really required. You didn't have to have a post-secondary degree to get a job, a family-sustaining job. If you graduated from high school, you'd be good to go. And if you didn't graduate from high school, you'd probably be okay, but those things don't exist anymore. I will follow in the footsteps of our moderator and throw out some numbers to you. The reality is that over the last 40 years, the percentage of jobs that require a post-secondary education has doubled. It's gone from 28% of jobs to 59% of jobs. And by 2018, 2/3 of jobs will require at least some post-secondary education. So as we know, education is the backbone of the nation's economy, and whereas in the past, education was a good thing to do, and equitable education was the moral thing to do, now providing an equitable education is simply an economic imperative. We have a situation where the Bible and the billfold are together. Knowing that we can't maintain the nation's economic vitality is important. Knowing that we can't do this without education is important, but it's especially important to realize that we can't do this without our Hispanic students. And again, it's really a matter of simple math. We know that the Hispanic population is the nation's fastest growing population. What's less well known is that in 22 states, today, not tomorrow, but today, in 22 states, students of color make up at least 40% of the student population. 22 states, 40% or more of the student population. 10 of those states, it's over half. The time when we're using the term minority to describe students of color, vastly going away. Surely our students of color are the rising majority. And thankfully, the population isn't the only thing that's rising about students of color. Academic outcomes for students of color are also increasing. Just last week, the Department of Education released data on the nation's graduation rate, which for the last several decades has really remained fairly flat. Over the past few years, it's increased and we now hit an 80% graduation rate. We should be proud of this, but not pleased with this. Right? We should be proud of our increase, but we should not be pleased that still we have 1 out of 5 kids who are not graduating on time, if at all. But from the perspective of Hispanic students, that increase would not have happened without Hispanic students, because of the Hispanic graduation rate since 2006 has increased by 15 percentage points. Right, so things are certainly on the right trajectory. And then of course, there's the flip side of the coin. Among kids who do graduate from high school, really relatively few are actually ready for college or career. Among those who take the ACT, only 14% of Hispanic students that take the ACT score at the college-ready level on all 4 areas tested by the ACT. So we know that we have more kids graduating, but we still need to do a better job of making sure that they're prepared once they actually graduate. So what are some of the reasons why we have the challenge with preparation? And I think that a lot of this has to do with what happens at the high school level. I'll broadly reference 3 things, and one of our colleagues here from the Office of Civil Rights will go into more detail on this first issue, and that is school climate. I'll just say real briefly that students of color make up 70% of school-related arrests. The first thing that has to be done when we're talking about addressing low-performing schools is making sure that schools are an inviting, welcoming place for students. So the 70% of arrests being focused on students of color, that's not going to work. Another really important issue is rigorous coursework. The schools that are serving the highest populations of students of color are the least likely to provide access to rigorous coursework, like Algebra 2, Calculus. These schools are also the least likely to have teachers with the most experience. Schools that serve the most students of color are more likely to have teachers that are serving in their 1st or 2nd year of service. Not a knock on new teachers, we need more of them. But the reality is that, as with anything else, we tend to get better as we do something longer. And so it's completely antithetical to the nation's economic imperative to have our schools that are predominantly serving the fastest growing population with teachers that lack experience. Another major issue, I think, is that too much instruction that takes place at the high school level is focused on low-level skills. It's memorization instead of critical thinking. It's doing what we're told instead of applying knowledge to solve problems. And the RAND Corporation, a very hoity-toity research outfit, did an analysis of the state tests that are implemented under No Child Left Behind, and found that the overwhelming majority of the questions asked focus on these low-level skills as opposed to the higher order thinking skills that our kids really need. And since instruction is largely driven by assessment, that mismatch is not going to work for the future. So what can be done about this? A few ideas for policy and practice. I mean, essentially, we need the rapid expansion of promising and effective policy and practice. And a few things to share. One is we need much more personalization in our nation's high schools. When Alex asked our student panel about their motivation, about what helped them make the transition, each one of our students named a person, not a program, not a policy, they named a person. But there are policies that can be in place that facilitate that type of personalization, and we need to implement more of those. Among the policy goals that we have to have is really creating a college-going culture in the nation's high schools, starting as early as the 9th grade or before. This happens in some schools where in the 9th grade, they're not asking, do you want to go to college? They're asking, what college are you going to go to? They're requiring the kids to fill out the FAFSA and helping them and their family do so. They're requiring the kids and their family to apply to schools. So as part of the culture, in order to graduate, college is just a part of what they're doing, and we need much more of that. One of our students was talking about how she was going to high school and college at the same time. Dual enrollment in early college programs are growing, very effective in North Carolina. It's certainly a leader in this. According to the data that I've seen, there are I think 77 early college high schools in North Carolina, certainly 15,000 kids. When you look at the graduation rates of these schools, it's over 90%. Compare the 90% to the nation's 80%, it says something. We need much more early college opportunities, much more dual enrollment opportunities. And I want to put in a plug, as I have received my note that you only have about 30 seconds left to listen to me. I'm sure that everyone's very sad about this. But the president in his budget has asked Congress to fund a high school redesign program. And the idea behind this program is to make the high school experience, which is now stuck in the 20th century, to bring it into the 21st century. The grantee for this program would not simply be the high school. It would be the high school in partnership with institutions of higher education and employers. So we'll really be creating a pipeline to post-secondary. And now, something else is buzzing. Okay, really stop. So I would encourage everyone to be vocally supportive among your congressional delegations about this specific opportunity, because it will create more opportunities for the young people that we heard from earlier to excel. We need many more of those stories, both from the economic perspective, and of course going back to what really matters, to the ethical perspective. There's no longer a dichotomy between the billfold and the Bible. They're together, and together we can make something more happen. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Engel. I'm here from the Institute for Higher Education Policy. We're located in Washington, D.C. We do research focused on issues related to college access, affordability, and success, particularly for underserved student populations. And I think for myself in particular, and I know for a lot of folks in this room, college access isn't just something that we think about professionally, it's actually a personal issue. Most of you are in this room because you have some sort of personal stake in improving college access. I was actually the first person in my family to go to college from a working class family in Ohio. And it was really tough for me to navigate my way into and through college 20 years ago, but it's even harder for students today. And yet, as we heard from Philip, it's actually even more important to go to college today than it ever has been. Now, there are actually a lot of critics out there and a lot of headlines out there asking and questioning whether college is still worth it and whether college is for everyone. So I want to assure you, from a research perspective, that the research clearly and consistently shows that college not only pays off, it pays off the most for those students who have historically had the least access to it. Now, the critics actually know this is true, despite the headlines. That's why you can be sure they're going to send their own kids to college. They're not talking about their own kids when they ask whether college is worth it or for everyone. You can also be sure that they're going to send their kids to the best colleges that their money can buy. And the reason why is that even though they're wrong, the critics are wrong that college isn't worth it, but they're right that not every college experience is worth it. And what I mean by that is not all institutions offer students a reasonable chance to succeed at an affordable price. So we really have to give students the information and the support they need to make a good choice about where to go to college so that we know that they will successfully earn the degree that they're trying to receive. That's not to say that every student needs to go to an expensive liberal arts college. And college going rates have gone up dramatically in the last 40 years. Today, more than 70% of Hispanic students go to college directly out of high school. That's up from about 45% in the early 1970s, and that's about on par with white students. So we have reason to celebrate. I think, as you said, we should be proud, but we shouldn't be content with that number. And the reason why is that despite those increases, Hispanic students on the whole do not have the opportunity to enroll in the same kinds of colleges and to have the same kinds of college experiences that their white peers do. White and Hispanic students are about as likely to go to community colleges, but Hispanic students are half as likely as white students to begin at a four-year institution. And they're 2.5 times more likely to start at a for-profit institution. 1 in 4 Hispanic students starts their college career at a for-profit institution. And we know that across that sector, the costs are dramatically higher and the outcomes are dramatically lower. So despite the decades of increases in college access that we've seen for all students, but in particular for Hispanic students, the increasing stratification of our higher education system undermines real opportunity for Hispanic students. We have to focus on not just college access, but access to what, if we're really going to ensure that Hispanic students have the same opportunities as their white counterparts. The result, as Deborah shared with us earlier, is that fewer than 20% of Hispanic young adults have an associate's degree or higher, and that's less than half the rate of their white counterparts. This is an outcome that neither the Hispanic community nor the country can afford. And I think Philip told us that very well with the stats that he shared on the evolution of our workforce and the importance of higher education in it. We talk a lot about how the demographics of this country are changing or are going to change, but in a lot of cities and in a lot of states, they've already changed. But colleges haven't changed yet. Higher education needs to change if we're going to serve all students and ensure that they have access to the quality degrees that they need to improve their life chances. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Is this on? No. Is it on now? Oh, great. My name is Will Crossley. I'm with the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. Glad to be with you. We want to certainly thank the White House Initiative throw out is that not everyone knows about our office or the work that we do. And so I wanted to try and take 30, 45 seconds to tell you a bit about our office, and then spend the remainder of the time talking about the civil rights data collection that we recently released, which Phil has talked about a little bit as well, and finally some of the work that we're doing in response to what we are seeing. So you'll have a flavor of how we can be a resource and a tool for you to use. So our office enforces, we're an administrative enforcement agency within the Department of Education, and we enforce the federal civil rights laws for any entity that receives federal funding through the department. And so our enforcement travels with the funds, whether they be a school or a university or a community organization. If they receive federal funds from the department, we have jurisdiction over them through the civil rights laws. Those laws include a number of things, but just very quickly, Section 504, which has to do with disability status. Children with learning disabilities have a right to a free and appropriate public education. So we enforce that. Title 9, the very familiar one involving gender discrimination, and the President recently had a sexual violence task force involving community college campuses, and then the sixth one, which is I think certainly most pertinent for our discussion today. The third one, which I think is certainly most pertinent for our discussion today, is Type 6, which is great color and national origin. We do that through two ways: through investigative work and then through policy guidance. One note on our policy guidance would be things like we did yesterday, which is we released clarification of our Plyler guidance. Plyler being the Supreme Court case, making it very clear that students are entitled to an education based on their residency and their age, and not based on their immigration status. And so we released guidance on that yesterday because we have 17 investigations across the country where individuals are asking for other kinds of information, driver's license of a parent or social security numbers, that before they would allow kids to participate in school. And so we wanted to knock down those barriers. And so we do that kind of guidance on Plyler. And then, certainly the purpose of our discussion today, our civil rights data collection, which fuels some of the work that we do. And we hope that it would be a tool for you. And having heard, again, both of you, some of it, we're confident that folks are using the data out in the world. It's accessible to all of you on our website. We hope you will go there. We looked at the entire country, and so nearly 50 million kids, 100,000 schools, 17,000 school districts, and you can go and you can find your school and see the data as it relates to each and every school in the country. So we would encourage you to do that and to be local advocates where you are. Some of the results of that data are in part for what we want to discuss today. I think the college and career readiness parts of that data are really astounding. Just to put a little bit more context on the numbers that were on the point that was issued earlier. If you look at advanced placement courses, African American, Latino students, certainly less access there. Chemistry was mentioned earlier. The stats on that are particularly astounding. Across the country, it turns out that about a quarter of our students don't have access to chemistry. If you look at the districts that have the 20% highest minority of Black and Latino children, that number jumps to 33%, do not have even access to a chemistry course in their school. So if you look at Algebra 1, which is easily a prerequisite for kids to go to college, and you look at the pass-fail rates in that, we know that African American students don't even have access to a counselor. And I was encouraged to hear one of the students earlier today talk about how a counselor was instrumental in helping them in terms of their future. Let me just make a couple of points that I think are particularly important. One is early childhood education. There are a number of pipeline issues that make a difference in terms of how our students fare in high school and then move on. So we know that 40% of our school districts don't even offer early childhood education. That certainly is the goal of the president to seek for universal, high quality early childhood education for all. And so we certainly highlight that. That's even more true for students who have ELL status, English language learning students are disproportionately represented among those who don't have early childhood education and are some of the ones who we know need that level of support. The last thing I would say, just an example of the kind of work we've done around this. I think a good example is our investigation in Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Cleveland has 4 STEM high schools where they're exposing kids to all kinds of great things. These kids are watching live surgeries happening in the hospitals there, doing internships in the local hospitals there at the school. And of over 5,500 kids who are eligible to participate in these kinds of STEM activities, they only had 5,500 Latino students. They only had 130 who were enrolled in those 4 STEM classes. So we conducted an investigation there and worked with them to adjust their policies, increase access. And that's the kind of work we try to do in response to the data. So we encourage you to certainly let us know as those things are happening. And I will get it there. Thank you.
So, I apologize. Our colleague could say so much more, but part of this is also making sure we get engaged with you. So please follow up because there's a lot of really good information they can all share with you. But what we shared with you is just a little bit about research and policies, stemming ideas. So let me just start with our panelists and ask them about application. Because again, research and policies is fine, the data, but you have to use it. So I'll start with Philip, and that way I get a little bit more time again. Philip, if you could do one thing, you have the power to do one thing to increase college access for Latino students, what would you do? Or what could we do?
Well, if I could really do anything,
Yes, go on.
I would do something about our immigration laws that make college free. In the world in which we live, I'll answer broadly by saying, right now, I don't believe that our pipeline between high school and college is broken. I believe that we don't really have a pipeline between high school and college, and so I would create one. And that would have many components that I don't have time to go into. Unless you'd like me to.
No, that was 3. That's good. Well, they put it away from me because they said it was too loud. Now I can't hear it. Thank you, Philip. Jenna?
Sure. Well, I think certainly there are a number of factors that are affecting college access for students, but we can't ignore the issue of affordability, and that's become an ever-pressing issue. There's a bit of a mythology that the Pell Grant takes care of low-income students, and that's just not true. I actually heard some laughter. It's just not true. Hispanic students have to come up with, after grant aid from all sources, on average, about $8,000. That's after all of their grant aid, whether that's coming from their Pell Grant, from the state grant, from any institutional grants that they might get. They have to come up with an additional $8,000. Where are they going to come up with that money? So we need to increase the Pell Grant in particular, but we also need to make sure that state and institutional dollars are flowing in the same direction as the Pell Grant, meaning that they're being targeted to the students who need them most, the low-income students.
I would focus on teacher and resource equity. I think that those who are working directly with our children can have the most profound impact on how they view themselves, the kind of expectations that they have for our children, affect the kind of expectations children have for themselves. And if we focus there and ensure that there's equitable access to high quality instruction and high quality teachers, it will make a world of difference.
Thank you. Second question I'd ask, part of the work we do in research and policy is really about how you frame the conversation to get people thinking about what they can do. And we talk, often a lot of our comments were broad stroke. We kind of included Latinos in there in general, but we didn't raise it up as the forefront. And part of the challenge I think we face is that, using a Latino lens and looking at these issues doesn't need to exclude other students. But often if we are overt and intentional in talking about Latinos first, we often are excluding them from the work that we do. So thinking about the framing of serving Latinos, making sure research and policy is paying attention to that construct, what would you say is the best framing using a Latino lens for practitioners who are in this field, in this space, to be able to advocate for the work they're doing?
Well, you can tell me if it's effective because I tried to use it, but I think that the frame should be both a positive one and one also based in reality. So the positive is that we're making progress. Graduation rates of Latinos has risen by 15 percentage points since 2006, and knowing the economic imperative and the fact that the Latino population is the fastest growing population, there's no way that we can sustain our economic growth without continuing that progress. But then we have to follow that up with the flip side of reality, and that is that there's still huge gaps. In North Carolina, the Latino graduation rate is 73%. For white students, it's in the upper 80s. So the reality is that while we're making progress, there are still huge gaps that need to be addressed.
I would say, and I think our students this morning really underscore this point well, Latino students are doing what they're supposed to do. They are getting prepared to the extent that their schools have those courses available. They are aspiring to college. Almost all Latino students aspire to some sort of higher education. Virtually all Latino students and their parents believe that education is a way to improve their life and their life chances. They're doing their part. Are we doing ours? That's how I feel.
And who is the we then?
Are schools offering the classes? Are we removing the structural barriers? The personal barriers are not there. The students want to do it. They want to succeed, but we haven't removed the structural barriers in terms of their preparation, in terms of giving them sufficient grant aid, and giving them high-quality experiences in the college.
So as a civil rights lawyer coming to this work, I'm commonly looking for the problems, which can sometimes take on a negative tone. But I think it's right that we want to try and frame this in a positive light. And I, in fact, even in our work, what we do is talk about the opportunities that we're creating and the barriers that we're eliminating. And so I think to the extent that we are seeing data that causes concern for us, we should know that we have resources available to remove those barriers and to create opportunities.
Great, thank you. Hopefully we've set a little bit of a context here. Any comments or questions from the audience about anything you've heard or criticism? Yes, and I think we have some mics. If you wouldn't mind coming to the mic so that everyone can hear you, please. I think this is also being recorded, so I want to make sure. And please let us know who you are before you ask the question.
Sure, thank you. My name is Anna Foiler. I'm a volunteer with the nonprofit Circle de Luz, and we provide mentoring and programming for Latinas to help them graduate from high school and achieve the dream of going to college. And one of my roles, I'm really nervous, one of my roles is to help them with the college application process. It's been 12 years since I went to college, East Carolina. I'm very proud of going to college. I'm also a first generation graduate. And what
So thank you very much for your question, and I appreciate your courage in asking it. I think the short answer is far too little. I'll give an example of something that I know is going on that's related to this, that I think really should be expanded, and actually the administration has a policy in place that will hopefully help to expand it. The reality is that we have far too few counselors in our schools. There are many of things that make schools under-resourced, and for this conversation, the lack of school counselors is a critical one. To some degree, I think technology can help with this, but personal relationships cannot be replaced by computers. So that's not to say that technology doesn't have a role. I firmly believe that it does, but we also need more people power. The connection between community organizations and schools is a powerful one when it's done well and when it's done right. In Philadelphia, there's partnerships between an organization that's actually very, I understand is fairly well known here in North Carolina, Communities in Schools. Communities in Schools working with the school system and working with City Year. And City Year is providing the additional volunteers that the school really needs to help personalize the school experience. I think an excellent sort of policy idea would be for volunteers to be trained in culturally sensitive ways to help specifically, I mean, really to replicate what you're doing. It's great what you're doing here, and we need much more of it because the college application process is overly complicated. Few things that everyone agrees on. I think that most people agree with that. And so there's just one example of where I know it's happening structurally with 3 organizations, each taking a different role. And it'd be great to learn more about what you're doing, because I think we should have more of it.
Let me take a point of personal privilege as the moderator. Somebody who deals with that as a Latina as well. But so I do thank you for what you do. Cultural competency is profound. Ignorance abatement is absolutely critical, right? Ignorance is not knowing, and when we impose our own experience and think that is applicable to others, we don't often get it right. So being open to experiences different than our own, seeking out cultural competency, you can train for a certain amount of that, ask the right kinds of questions, but we need more role models. We need more Latinas out there working with Latinas. We need those that can acknowledge serving the students they might not know. You don't only have to be Latina, but you have to be exposed to what that is. And that's what a lot of our Latinas, but honestly a lot of our Latino males are also being challenged to find that kind of support and strategy. So amplifying your story, ignorance abatement, one that's very asset-based, talking about the benefit and opportunity of Latinos rather than the deficit and the crisis of educated Latinos. We have to flip the script to make sure the profile and the understanding is not this negative face of our community, because our young people do internalize it. And I appreciate you're trying to rectify that. We need to catch it earlier and make sure that these kinds of fora and discussion are perpetuated in any venue that we can lead. And we don't apologize for being Latinos or supporting Latinos, and we make sure that's the opportunity. I think we have to push it from a over perspective and stop apologizing for not being like others want us to be.
Fernando Martinez, Dignidad a las Escuelas, Dignity in Schools campaign. I actually have a question for Mr. Crossley with the Office of Civil Rights. This is a college track forum, right? Like access to college. But the reason I'm here today is because in order for our Hispanic and Latino and all the students actually to access to college, we need to graduate first, right? They need to graduate first. So I was really hoping that you will talk more about the federal discipline guidance that you released in January 8th in collaboration with the Department of Justice, because Latino and Black and LGBTQ students are being pushed out of the school system into the juvenile justice system. And this is something that people are not talking about right here, today at least. So I really appreciate if you elaborate more in the federal discipline guidance and also in the My Brother's Keeper initiative and what is coming down the pipe to fix that problem right there. And for Dr. Engel, I think, I would also like to elaborate a little bit more on the structural barriers that you're talking about in the schools right now. I mean, the fact that teachers don't look like the student population. It was an article this week about teachers in the classroom are not looking like our students. So I want to see if there's anything going on to get more Black and Latino teachers in the classroom.
Great. Okay, two critical questions.
So I appreciate the question. I could have paid you beforehand because I ran out of time to answer it. But it was in January of this year that we released guidance. That guidance was in fact based on the kinds of data that we've been talking about, both in 9-10 when we collected civil rights data, as well as our level 12 data, showing that Latino and Black boys in particular are subject to disproportionate administration of discipline for similar kinds of misbehavior. And when we released that guidance, it was two parts. One was a Dear Colleague letter, which is our way of saying, as we did with Plyler yesterday, that here are the ground rules, and making it clear that discriminatory administration of school discipline, we find it's violative of Title VI, and we intend to enforce it, and we are doing that in districts across the country. The second part was we didn't want to just tell people what not to do, but we also wanted to tell them what to do. And so we wanted to talk about how school districts could use positive disciplinary measures, rewarding kids for the kinds of behavior that we want to see, as opposed to simply punishing kids for what we don't want to see. And so that was a two-part of a discipline guidance that we released with the Attorney General and our Secretary, Arnie Duncan. I'm very pleased that that's also available on our website, or simply by Googling Ed school discipline, you can find it as well.
So I think on the structural barriers, my colleagues actually covered it really well in terms of what some of those barriers are that remain at the K-12 level. So we know that preparation is still an issue because the courses aren't there. And we know that counseling is an issue because the counselors aren't there. And so students can't prepare to the levels that we know they need to if they don't have the resources to do that. That said, we also know that even similarly prepared low-income students and students of color are less likely to go on to college, and they're less likely to go on to more selective institutions. And so there's still a barrier there. There's an information barrier, there's an affordability barrier, and there's a support barrier. So we need to continue to focus on each of those things. I think one way, thinking about the programs that are operating locally, is that some of this problem seems too big when we try to tackle it on a national scale. But for many first-generation college goers, they're going to go to college within about 50 to 100 miles of where they grew up. I certainly did. There were lots of good schools that actually I got into that I just didn't go because I didn't want to be that far away from home. Those relationships between the local college access providers and those local institutions where about 80% of your students are going to go, and making sure there's a person to hand them off to when you get them to college makes a huge difference, because they've had this support at the K-12 level. They don't know who to go talk to when they get to the college level. So thinking about local solutions is just as important as the national ones.
Thank you, Jennifer. We go to the back and then to the front.
My name is Luisa Agathon, and I'm representing the Latin American Women's Association, or LAWA, and we are a nonprofit organization focused on the advancement of education for Latino students in the Charlotte region. My question is a two-part question. I want to know what you believe are the effects of affirmative action, and what are for-profit institutions doing that non-for-profit institutions are not doing in marketing and reaching out to the minority students.
Great question.
On the for-profit piece in particular, I think that, it's really instructive, given that we know that for-profits are more expensive, and yet we see a disproportionate number of low-income students and students of color attending those institutions. And I think that speaks to the opportunity gap, which those institutions are exploiting to an extent. They know that if they reach out directly to students, and it's almost got some of the similar tactics to thinking about military recruitment in terms of, and they've got the money to do it. And so the outreach and that personal touch and the relationship, they can actually put the money behind it to do that. Again, I don't want to cast aspersions on an entire sector of higher education, but I do think that the outcomes overall suggest that we should be concerned that 1 out of 4 Hispanic students are starting at a for-profit institution. This is not the second chance institution that they go back to later. This is where they're starting, and it means a lot to where they finish, if that's where they're starting.
Yeah. I'll add, for many first-generation college goers, college is college. They don't see the distinction of tax status, which is a big challenge. And then I'll say the other thing they're doing, for-profits see the marketplace. The marketplace is black and brown, and they're going for it in ways that many of our public institutions could but aren't. And this is what they do. They tell you 4 things. We want you, we'll work around your schedule, we'll help you get aid, we'll help you get a job. See that on 1 page. On the other side it's in Spanish, so if you need to share with my parents, they have it there. A for-profit does that, and they're going to get these students, as opposed to these publics that are making us go through hoop after hoop. Did you apply? Did you take the SAT? Did you do the 17 different things? So it's not a surprise that our students are choosing to go there. The fact that we're paying twice over, and our taxes are paying for public education we're not availing ourselves of, and then we're paying for a for-profit is heinous at an economic level. But there are things that our public institutions could do that replicate what that for-profit model is that we're not doing. So that's the part. And then from
just very briefly on affirmative action, we know that it has been, in the context of education, we know that it has been effective in terms of creating access for students, but more than that, in terms of creating a diverse and rich environment, learning environment for all students, whether they be students of color or not. And so we have been in favor of policies that provide for that reduce racial isolation. In fact, earlier this week, there's some final guidance that we released yesterday. On Tuesday of this week, we released guidance in response to the Supreme Court's recent opinion about 12 days ago, in which they upheld a people's referendum out of Michigan, in which they said in that state that you cannot consider an individual's race as a part of a public vetting process. Supreme Court upheld that, but we put out guidance to say that we did not see that as a barrier to school districts or universities who are choosing to reduce racial isolation and seek diversity among their student body. You have to do it in an individualized way. And the court has said we can't use quotas, but there is certainly an avenue to do that. And we stand ready to provide technical assistance and work with schools, universities, and individuals who may want to pursue those kinds of aims.
My name is Cynthia Hayes. I'm with ICCD. And there are a couple of things mentioned that I wanted to ask a question of, but also make a statement about, particularly around the context of teacher equity and disparity in teachers, as well as the structural barriers and removing those barriers. So first I will start by a comment that Mr. Lowell mentioned about the Bible and the checkbook. Well, when I read mine, it says train up a child. So let's start with that. As a parent, I witnessed and had a principal of a school say to me that they were not prepared, in the middle school, they were not expecting the children to go to college. Well, he didn't know the parent he was speaking to. Because my 2 boys are in college, and that's not just an expectation. That is a demand of my children's lives. So let's talk about the barriers. Now I know I've heard mentioned that you cannot tackle this thing from a national level. It's not that you can't, it's just more difficult and complicated. So having brought my children from Michigan to North Carolina, and having heard that from an educational system here, I can can only imagine that that's mimicked and mocked throughout the country based on the statistics we've talked about. 14% are college ready after the ACT scores come in, even though we're graduating. So how can you, number one, address the issue about the disparity in the mindset of the people we're putting in our system called educators who don't have the mindset to educate and prepare? So where do you think, and again, I'm only speaking from experience, data, and understanding, as well as comments made today about barriers and structural barriers and removing those barriers. And then teacher disparity. I'm not, even though I'm an IT major, I'm not necessarily with this whole Twitter, Facebook thing, but I realized back when I studied it in college that it was coming. I'm just the last resistor, even though I helped to develop a lot of that stuff.
You're not last, don't worry. Okay.
It's almost a mockery of our nation to know that teachers and educators are on these public forums making derogatory comments about the students of color particularly. So when we talk about teacher equity and disparity and structural barriers, and again, train up a child, how do you see your role as policymakers, enforcement agencies and entities? What do you think you can do to particularly address those issues from a social perspective that are in part creating these barriers and impeding the progress for our children to proceed forward?
Thank you. Maybe we'll start with Philip.
No, certainly. So there's no excuse for some of the behavior that you described, and I think anyone that would try to make an excuse should not be in the education system. One thing